and welcome to today's Caregiving Essentials Webinar, Brothers and Sisters are Caregivers to Support for Families from Siblings Canada. It's mid-January, and I think everyone in Canada is feeling some kind of cold. So I hope everyone is staying warm and staying safe with all the snow and cold weather. Before I introduce our speakers today, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge the land on which McMaster University resides. Is part of the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. My name is Christine Kennedy, and today I'd like to welcome Donna and Helen up to our regular series. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who are regular attendees, thank you so much for supporting our programming by joining us again today. As usual, before I introduce everyone, I go through sort of the logistics of how to work a Zoom webinar. So there were a number of pre-submitted questions, so thank you for submitting those, and I believe Donna and Helen will be getting to those sort of throughout the conversation. If you do have a question that you would like to ask, feel free to ask that in the Q&A. The chat is also open, so feel free to post something in the chat. Just do be mindful that the chat is open for the public, so maybe don't put anything too private or put any information that you wouldn't want everyone to see. The Q&A little icon is at the bottom, as is the chat on your computer screen. And as usual, the recording, the webinar is being recorded and a link will be sent to you, and all of the recordings, if you've missed any of the webinars over the last couple of years, they're all listed on the Caregiving Essentials webinar YouTube channel. So feel free to look at those. And if you're joining us for the first time, or maybe you've joined us just since the fall, I would encourage you to take a look at that YouTube channel, because there are lots of great conversations that Donna has had with many different types of speakers. So without further ado, let me introduce our host for today, Donna Thomson. Donna is a caregiver, author, and educator. She is the author of 2 best-selling books on caregiving, including The Unexpected Journey of Caring. She also facilitates the free online course for caregiving, Caregiving Essentials, and she is a co-designer and co-instructor of the Family Engagement and Research course. All of those are through McMaster. And today, Donna is being joined by Helen Ries. Helen is an advisor with Siblings Canada. She's also the co-founder of Siblings Canada, part of the Canadian Centre for Caregiving Excellence. Helen is a community builder, innovator, and most importantly, carer to her brother, Paul. During a lifetime of advocating, Helen has learned of the power of full and inclusive citizenship for all members of our community. Helen holds an MBA from University of Guelph, just up the road from McMaster. Donna and Helen, thank you for joining us on this very wintry day. Good thing we're meeting virtually and not in person, because we may have not been able to meet in person.
I know. Thank you so much, Christine. And welcome, my friend Helen. We used to be neighbors in Ottawa. And I think we met, I don't know, a long time ago, it feels like. But you know, I am so thrilled that you're here today, Helen, because we've never in this webinar series talked about sibling caregiving before. And, you know, when you think about families and the way we care for each other, you and I both come from the family arm of the disability movement, but we know that brothers and sisters care for each other all the time. And you know, my daughter and I talk a lot about her being a sibling to her brother with a disability and what that felt like growing up, and what her future might look like. And just before the webinar started, we were saying, like I said, oh my gosh, none of us knows what we're doing in trying to figure this out. And make it fair and make it doable and encourage loving relationships and have everybody kind of know their roles and responsibilities. It's really complicated. So thank you for joining us today. And we are going to be chatting a little bit about all forms of sibling caregiving, not just in the disability context. But first, Helen, I want to ask you, just to tell us about your family. So, your parents have both passed away, but what was it like growing up in your family? Um, Tell us about your family.
Sure. First, I just wanted to say, Donna, how much I appreciate that you're willing to have this conversation. I think it's a really important one to have, and I think we're not having it yet. So I feel like this is one of the first big conversations we're having about siblings and sibling caregiving. So thank
Wow.
you. And our family, so our family was really small. There was both my parents were only children, so I had no aunts or uncles or cousins, which was quite different to the experience of a lot of people. And so it was just me and Paul, although we had our grandparents all to ourselves because with no cousins, we got all their attention. I grew up in Ottawa, and I live actually just around the corner from where Paul and I grew up. Our childhood, I guess, was in a way quite idyllic. We spent a lot of time playing with the other kids on the street, my brother as part of that. And, my mom spent a lot of time going to church, which was a welcoming community for my brother. And
Helen,
yeah.
maybe we could explain what are your brother's particular needs, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit about, he has a disability.
Yes. So my brother Paul is right now he's 51 years old, and he's a person with Down syndrome. He has in the last few years also has other disabilities. So he's got developed a physical disabilities and also mental health disabilities. So his disabilities are now quite complex.
Yeah, it's wonderful to imagine you guys just out in the street playing together,
Yeah.
completely unaware, I guess, of what the future might hold.
Mhm.
So your parents died unexpectedly. Every death isn't unexpected, but they died quite close together, I think. Isn't that right?
Yeah,
And
they died just a few years apart, or a couple of years apart, and both of them, yeah, they were quite young. They were in their early 70s, both of them, and both their deaths really came absolutely out of the blue.
yeah, so that's hard enough for any child of parents who, I don't know, I think we always think our parents are going to live forever and that they are our anchors. I mean, I know when my mother died at the age of 96, and well, this was in 2018, and I'm 68 now. So, I mean, I was, almost a senior citizen. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like if my life falls apart, I can't go to my mom anymore.
Yeah,
And I was an older adult thinking
right.
that my mother was that anchor for me.
Hmm.
And so, but in your case, how did that change your relationship with your brother? That suddenly it was you and Paul against the world.
Hmm. And I wanted to include my husband in that too, because it's Paul, my husband, and I against the world.
Yeah.
My husband's family lives overseas, so they're not around either. So it really is just the three of us. And I say we grew up, in this idyllic kind of setting. However, all sibling relationships are quite fraught, right? Like we weren't always the best of friends. And
Mhm.
when I became his carer, first of all, I hadn't really lived with him or been a huge part of his life since I was 18. I left home at 18. And so there was a huge chunk of time when I wasn't involved day to day. And, you know, he was really distressed by the passing of my parents, understandably, because whereas I could understand how our worlds had changed, I think for him that was quite an abstraction. And plus, my mom, who was the second one to die, died while he was away on vacation with a group of other people with developmental disabilities. So it was very traumatic for him. And we really struggled with a power dynamic. So whereas a parent has an authority in over their child, whether they're a child or an adult child, I don't, and I still don't have that kind of authority. Plus, my father, before my father died, he said to my brother, "Well, you're the captain now." And boy, would I like to have a word with my father about that, because that really set the stage for how my brother felt his place in the house was. He was the captain and he was going to do what he wanted, and I was going to follow. So there was a
Yeah.
lot of struggle with power, and how do I support his decisions? How do I help him navigate the world without being an authority? And that's something I don't know, because I had no models. I could only see what my parents did, and they had that parental authority that I certainly didn't have.
Yeah. Can I just stop you there for a sec?
Yes.
Can you bring your computer just a little bit closer? Because there's a few people in the audience who are saying they're just having a little difficulty
Sure.
hearing you. I can hear you fine, but I think that's going to be helpful. Thank you. It's so interesting what you say about power and the way it relates to dependency needs when we're caring for someone. I remember reading something that really struck me recently, and it was a woman writing into a group, a support group online, and she was saying, I was very successful propping up my mother's fake independence until last Thursday when she
Mm.
fell and broke her hip.
Mhm.
And the way that I'm hearing your story of Paul sort of being king of the castle or whatever, um, I I wonder if part of that power dynamic or power imbalance, sort of saying, "Hey, wait a sec, I'm in charge,"
Mhm.
and then you potentially and Stefan, your husband, saying, "Wait a second, the whole situation, we are grieving for one thing, and the other thing is I'm in charge," you know, and I guess there's so many questions that are brought up by just this one observation that you made, or one experience you're telling us about, this initial struggling to find a balance of power. And I'm just dying to ask you, Helen, how can we do a better job in families of preparing for these shifts in power? And specifically, I'm thinking about my own family. When someone's dependency needs are suddenly revealed, that fake independence goes poof. And we need to step in and take charge of meeting those dependency needs to keep a person safe. But often there's all this friction that goes along with it. And particularly so, or uniquely so, in the way it plays out in siblings. And can you talk about that? And I would love to know what lessons you've learned. If you could talk to your younger self, what would you say?
The idea of that fake independence, I love that you brought that up, because I think that's maybe a trademark of the families in disability, is that we so desperately, and I know my parents were like this, they so desperately want a good life for your loved one, and so you put all these pieces in place that it's like a setting on a stage where you put all these pieces in place that look like a good life, but they're all very fragile, and they can quickly fall apart. And I think my parents did that too. My brother lived independently, but he lived in next door in a duplex. My parents lived on the other side, and really my mom was running back and forth managing two households. So, but the narrative was he lived independently and that he
Right.
went to work. But his workplace, I don't think, in the 90s, they really knew what to do with people with disabilities in the workplace. And so I think that was also not an authentic work experience necessarily for him. So I I I don't blame my parents. I don't blame any parents for that, because there's so much social pressure for our, for belonging, and that, look at, like, we can do this. And yes, when one of those cards falls down, it does fall apart. So for my younger self, I don't know, I would have had the wherewithal to know. I frankly think that I'm still don't have the wherewithal to figure things out. But I think that authenticity, authentic discussions about what's really happening, who's paying what bills, really,
Mhm.
and and what kind of support is the parent offering day to day or even beyond. I think just I wouldn't have ever known those things until I became a caregiver. And I mean, authentic conversation, it sounds like such a simple answer, but in families it really never is. Like, I can't blame my parents for not telling me, because it was probably me. It was probably me not wanting to hear what
Mhm.
everything that they were doing, and that would ultimately be mine to hold. I'm pretty sure I'd never wanted to have that conversation. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I think I'm a big fan of counseling, and I think going to counseling has really helped my relationship with my brother. And I wonder what our family would have been like if we'd have had somebody else intervening to help with those discussions, or to um, help us along. But that's not available to everybody. I know. Yeah, one can look back and wish, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, um, part of when I think about how siblings grow up, and when one sibling might have a health condition or a disability that requires special attention from the parents, um, that can be a cause of sibling rivalry. It certainly was in my two kids. Um, and which impacts their relationship as uh, adults. And at the same time, I I tried so hard to protect our daughter from the burden of care that we had on our shoulders to bring up our son, who is very medically complex, and requires a lot of 24/7 nursing care. Um, and you know, in just chatting about our own family experience and our own family life, I often remind our daughter of the times that maybe Nicholas, we arranged for him to go to respite care so that we could spend one-on-one time with her. And I made a book of photographs of her whole life, of us just with her, to
Mhm,
sort of, you know, rearrange her version of our family history.
mhm.
But she did take, through Siblings Canada, a program called Acceptance and Compassion Therapy. Is that what it's called?
Acceptance and commitment training.
That's what it is. Tell us about that and why it's so helpful for the able-bodied siblings and families.
Yes. I'm so proud of our acceptance and commitment training workshops. I think it's one of the most powerful direct impact programs that we offer at Siblings Canada. And what we do through that program is really try and help siblings get the tools so that they can uh, deal with the many difficult feelings that they have about being a sibling, or about their caregiving role if they have one, or about their future caregiving role that they might be anticipating. There's a lot of complexity in those feelings. So it's how to help deal with those feelings in a way that's mindful and loving and respectful. And so it's a 6 weeks of workshops, and each week is a new set of tools that siblings take away and practice. And we see really amazing outcomes from siblings who take acceptance and commitment training. Originally, our program was through the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and now we're running it through Queen's University, just so that we can keep it going over time. And we've added onto that monthly support group. So once somebody's been through acceptance and commitment training, they can come to the support group and work on their processes. And I guess another part about that, there's the tools that you learn, but it's actually just connecting with other siblings and being able to share your stories. So like parents, when a sibling, when their child is diagnosed, they will often connect with other parents of people with disabilities right away. But siblings, because we don't think of ourselves as caregivers, it's just our life. We don't think of ourselves that way. We don't connect. And so we often only connect when something's happened or there's an opportunity to connect. But usually there's something that's driving people to connect as a sibling. So that's the other big piece around that program that's just so amazingly powerful.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting to consider sibling caregivers is just a very interesting subject to consider, because I think, we often say that caregivers are invisible, but I think sibling caregivers are particularly invisible, because we don't, when we think about a health diagnosis like childhood cancer or a disability, something that's going to affect the individual for their life, you think about the family, you usually just think about that child and the parents. The sibling is very often outside of all considerations, really. And I think it was someone in the literature who called siblings glass children. Have you heard that expression?
I have. I don't love that expression. It implies a fragility, and but I mean, you are right, and I guess the notion of glass children is right in that siblings are often overlooked in the family system, ecosystem of care. And I think you alluded to it earlier, Donna, when you were talking about how you were trying to protect your daughter from the care. And I think that's where that stems from. And even, I mean, even if you look historically at institutionalization, one of the biggest arguments to institutionalize a child with a disability is that it would be better for the sibling if the brother or sister with disability was not there. So I think, separating siblings and has been a tradition for a long time, or it's been a practice for a long time, and we have been overlooked. And I think, as we have more and more people with disabilities aging and outliving their parents, I think this is the work of Siblings Canada, trying to make aware that we are here and we're an important part of the care team. And we also have a particular way of being in the care team. So we are not our parents, and it's a choice to be part of the care team. So there's some complexity to that as well. But I'm not a huge fan of, like, I don't consider myself a glass child. Your life is what it is, and we actually at Siblings Canada really struggled with saying sibling caregiving, because a lot of siblings don't actually see themselves that way. It's just their life, and it's the way they've been their whole lives, or the whole life of their brother or sister.
Yeah. Well, and you know, we talk all the time about caregivers often just simply don't self-identify as a caregiver. They simply say, I'm husband, wife,
Right.
daughter, son. And so sibling, I think the problematic word is not sibling, it's caregiver, right?
Yes,
So
yes. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But so tell us about your life now and how how is your family working now to make sure that everybody is safe at home, comfortable, taken care of? How does your life in your household work day to day?
Big question. So, I want to say that I had to give up my career to be a carer. So that's not unusual. I know a lot of carers do end up doing that. I gave up my career and I started a consulting practice because I thought it would be easier for me to work from home. But I've had to give that up too. So I'm only working theoretically part time as with Siblings Canada, which should allow me more time to get things done, but I don't feel like I do get all that done. We're very lucky in that we have quite a bit of support. So because Paul has developed some physical disabilities about 7 years ago because of a surgery, we have PSW support in the mornings and in the
Personal
evening.
support worker. Mhm.
Yes, thank you. And we also have supported independent living for Paul. So our approach is that Paul is a roommate in our home. And so he has supported independent living workers who come and help him to have support so that he can have his own life and go shopping and run his errands. That means that there's about 15 people a week coming through our home, which is a
Wow.
lot of traffic.
It
um,
is.
mhm.
Gosh, how do you maintain your privacy and with all these people coming and going?
That's really hard, and I think it's one of the um, things that I notice the most, and I feel I really struggle with. We have a pretty a direct route from the front door to Paul's room, and Paul has his own bathroom. So that's really helpful. And also, I trained Paul. I trained him he can put on his captain hat and manage the people who come and work with him. Um, I've trained him that people are not to walk through our house. They're not to come into the kitchen or into my bedroom, although people have gone into my bedroom before, amazingly. And so Paul's pretty good at keeping folks in line, and people just come in and out. And same with the supported independent living workers. They often will take Paul out of the home, and if we've had conversations. The SIL workers are very respectful, and they understand that privacy is an issue for, I think, all families that have support in their home are not getting the privacy that they wish for.
Yeah, it's a high price to pay for people coming in to give you help that you really need. I remember feeling that way so much. Whenever I felt like I couldn't argue with my husband, for example.
Mhm.
Um, I felt like I needed uh, to not, I felt like needed not to be in my pajamas, even if I hadn't had any sleep the night before, if I'd been
Right,
up all night
right.
with Nicholas, looking after him.
Yes. I never used to be a tidy person. I always used to be like, everything's a wild disaster. Well, my bedroom's still a wild disaster, which is one of the reasons I don't like people going in there. But now my house is tidy. I spend like at least, an hour and a half in the morning ensuring that everything on the
Yeah.
main level is clean. So,
Yeah, like clean for the cleaning lady because, oh my gosh, why do we do this to ourselves?
yeah.
I know, but you know, in we had the deep pleasure of having Paul and you on a panel recently at the Canadian Center for Caregiving Excellence Summit, the
Mhm.
conference. And we were talking about how to balance paid care and natural support of families.
Mhm.
And I thought it was so interesting when we asked Paul, what do Helen and Stefan do for you that no one else could do? And do you remember how he answered that question? Can you tell us?
He said they give me love.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, they know me best and they love me.
Mhm.
And which also reminds me that in terms of siblings and families generally, we are living in an aging population. And many parents who, over the lifetime of a family, have taken the burden of care. Siblings are more and more and more, as you just said, going to be taking on the care for siblings, whether or not they have a disability. They might have, the effects of the lifelong effects of having had a childhood disease, or they might have they might develop Alzheimer's in later life. And when other families are not there, we know siblings step in. And anyone who follows Dr. Brian Goldman on CBC, for example, will have been very moved by his description of caring for his sister Joanne until she died. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, there was no one else to care for her. He was the only sibling and the only adult family member left on his side of the family. So sometimes, we talk about love and necessity, making us take on these caring roles. So
Mhm.
I think, like you say, siblings are going to be taking on these roles more and more. What
And
is
I
the role of Siblings Canada in helping people prepare for
Mhm.
this change in the family?
Mhm. If I could, there's just something that you said that I feel is really important to address. And not all siblings have the kind of relationship where they can step into care
Mm.
or want to step into care for their brothers and sisters. So, it's very different from a parent in that it's really not our birthright to become the caregiver of our brothers and sisters. And it's a choice that we make, maybe a choice out of necessity. There's a lot of factors that play into that, but I just really want to say that up front because we try at Siblings Canada to really respect that not everybody can or wants to step into the role of care. And but for those who do want to step into the role of care at Siblings Canada, we have a number of tools available or programs. I mean, we have the acceptance and commitment training, which we talked about, which is really to support mental health of siblings, whether they're thinking about becoming the carer, they actually are the carer. And that's to ensure that we remain resilient because, we're in it for the long haul. It's not a short term gig. That's what I'm learning 10 years in. It's definitely not a short term gig. And we also have something called peer mentorship, which is let's say you need to make a plan or you need to do something around uh, caregiving for your sibling and you need to brainstorm with someone. So we do a lot of mentor matches. We have a lot of webinars and we have a program called Savvy Siblings, which is a free online course to help siblings understand benefits and financial needs of people with disabilities in Canada. I think that's one of the things that I found so overwhelming about becoming Paul's carer is that I had to learn overnight what my parents had decades to learn, like around RDSPs and benefits and it's so complicated. I have a degree in administration and I find it the most challenging administration that I've ever done or ever faced. So there's a lot to learn if you are planning to step into the care role. And then I think the most important work that we do is we try to connect siblings with each other and tell their stories, because when you hear your story in someone else's words, it helps to reduce isolation and you feel like you belong to a community. It just I think makes us feel less alone. So
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do here too in
exactly.
this webinar series. And we're all
Mhm.
holding hands together, sort of saying like, wow, we don't exactly know what we're doing. None of us do. It's
There's
a very
something else
humbling experience.
There's something else that we're working on at Siblings Canada that I would like to share, and that's, the experience of siblings is not really well understood. It's, as we've talked about a couple of times, we're generally overlooked. We haven't been considered, and so we don't really know what that experience is like. And plus, the dynamics of the demographics are changing. Like we haven't had to know that much about aging and disability and sibling relationships. So we have quite a number of research partners, and right now we're doing some work, for example, with Dr. Block at University of Western Ontario on mutual care. So what does it look like when you move in together, or when you make the decision to change your living situations, and how do brothers and sisters work together? So I'm
Mhm.
excited about that project.
Well, that's so interesting. And it speaks directly to that line of inquiry, speaks directly to a conversation that we had on the panel, which was about how Paul cares for you and your husband. Can you
Mm.
tell us about how he does that? Because care is always reciprocal.
It's always reciprocal. And, I also think for my brother, he's always been somebody who wanted to contribute.
Mhm.
He worked for 21 years in a crown corporation. He's all about what, his job is and how can he contribute. And so helping him carve out his role inside the home. It's been an evolving process because we've had a lot of challenges. Like I said, he had a traumatic surgery, and then the pandemic led to some mental health disabilities. So we've had a number of challenges, really significant challenges crop up in the meantime. But so it's been an evolving process. But what he does now, which I find so lovely, is he makes us breakfast. So he always makes coffee. He was boiling eggs to the point where now I can't eat a boiled egg. But anyway, he sets the table, puts out the cereal, like he sets up the breakfast table. And he does a lot of jobs around the house. So this morning I gave him all the towels to wash. I try not to be overwhelming, but I give him like one significant job a day. He washed the kitchen floor yesterday. And in the evenings, he does security. So unfortunately we got robbed, and I think that had a
Oh,
really big impact on my brother. But
mm,
now he does security. He goes around the house, closing the blinds, making sure the doors are locked, and I think that's really lovely. And yeah, so there's lots and lots and lots of ways he contributes. I think one of the things I would say about his contribution is he makes this house a home. So my husband and I are both quite lazy. If it was just him and I at Christmas, we'd eat a bag of chips and just like, we would never put up a tree. Like it's just who we are. But, with my brother around, this place is decked to the nines. We have like a lovely meal, and Paul's always reminding us what there is to celebrate in the world. And I think
mm,
I need to hear that sometimes, often actually, what
yeah.
do we have to celebrate? So that's Paul's.
Oh, oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. And, it just reminds me of, we talk a lot about the burden that is caregiving, but I don't think we talk enough about how it deepens our love for each other and how it deepens our um, ability to appreciate joy and beauty and love. And it sort of makes us do that. It compels us to do that many times. And just that example of Christmas is, I think, a very big demonstration of that. But I guess I'm interested to know how, I'm, that I very interested in how the experience of caregiving transforms us personally, and which is why the book that Zachary White and I wrote is called The Unexpected Journey of Caring, The Transformation of Loved One to Caregiver. And can you describe, Helen, the person you were before you took on caring for Paul and the person you are now? How has caring for Paul in your home with your husband, Stefan, how has that changed you? And I'm interested in, I guess, the lessons that you've learned through this transformation that you're able to share with others at Siblings Canada.
Ooh, Donna, that's a big question. I have changed a lot, and I continue to change. I mentioned earlier, a lot of my change has been in tandem with some regular counseling. I think the circumstances of taking over care were traumatic, and essentially becoming caregiver meant dismantling the life I built for myself and rebuilding a new life. So I have always been really driven and really fast and ambitious. Like, I want to get things done. But I don't know if anybody saw the movie Peanut Butter Falcon, where the fellow with Down syndrome, he's walking really slowly, and the guy's like, "Can't you hurry up?" So my husband and I just howled at that scene, because that's our life. Like, can't you just hurry up? The answer is definitively no. So it's really takes me a lot to be patient. I'm not patient by nature, so try so hard to be patient. Um, I I think I experience a lot of, like many caregivers, experience an enormous amount of stress around caregiving. I have a tendency towards thinking catastrophically, especially because of the circumstances in which my mom passed away and then my brother's surgeries. So I use ACT a lot to help me, just be present in my day to day. I, as far as lessons go, I think, man, I don't really know what to say. I I think that it opens your eyes into who's really your friends, who's really part of your network. It's amazing to me the changeover in people who are in our life now versus people who were in our lives before. Um, People who appreciate us as a family and recognize that we are a family together, I think is really important to me. But the lessons are really in line with the things that I value. So, for example, that's
Yeah,
something that I value. Um,
yeah.
um,
I wrote a blog post some years ago called What Has Grown in Me and What Died in Me When I Became a Caregiver. And I think over time, some of our core values and core beliefs about the control we have over life really, really shifts.
yeah.
The control we have over outcomes generally.
I think one of the things that's changed for me really recently is that I have come to realize that I matter. I think it's something that I've always put myself second. I mean, even as a kid, I don't know, it's just who I am. It's not and who I've always been, but I've really come around to realizing that um, I really matter in all of this. And so I need to do what's best for me first, which I think feels contrary to being a caregiver, but just very recently, I noticed that my whole life had become about caregiving. My work is about caregiving. My home life is caregiving, and as lovely as that is, I don't want that for myself. And so I've actually gone back to school. I'm going to do a diploma in fine arts part-time, just as a way to reclaim myself, to do what I want, something for me. So I think that's a lesson that I'd like to share, is that you matter, and you're really first in all of this, which is really hard for, I think, a lot of us to swallow.
Yeah, it is. It is. It, like you say, it's counterintuitive. And but I'm filled with admiration that you've gone back to school and you're doing art. Beautiful work that I'm lucky enough to see because we're friends on Facebook. But you know, Helen, we have a question here that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our webinar, which is when you grow up as brother and sister, and then you have relationships that are developing, how does this relate to authority and power dynamics within the family? And you alluded to this at first, when you were talking about Paul and his idea that, you know, he likes to be king. And who doesn't, right? But so you did talk a little bit about the power dynamics between Paul and yourself, but I'm interested in Stefan in all of this too, because you're a family with your husband, and everybody's like this in the family home. Can you talk a little bit about how your marriage works and what is the effect on Stefan as an individual too? Because naturally he's part of the caregiving and possibly care receiving, ebb and flow in family life too.
Yes. So I think a lot of siblings worry a lot about their partners. And first of all, how do you find a partner who's going to agree to that your future may include caring for your sibling with a disability? I mean, partnership is a really, it comes up all the time in sibling only discussions. And I feel very lucky to be partnered with Stefan. He's a special breed of man. He's very, very introverted, and he doesn't, I mean, it's actually something I have to pay attention to. He's quite satisfied to, sit quietly while Paul and I are, you know, hashing something out or shouting at each other or something. Like, he's happy to just sit there quietly. So I have to actually make sure that I don't overlook him in all of this, and that I make time for him or for us. And I do get offended sometimes. People say, well, how's Paul? I'm like, well, Stefan's fine too, actually. He's here as well. So I think people forget that you're partnered. And Stefan is the absolute boss. I think it's because he's quiet. So when he tells Paul to do something, that's like the hand of God coming down, and like, you're going to do it. So I save his power and authority for very special occasions when I'm desperately need that support. But our role in our family, and it's not true. I talk to a lot of siblings, and this is not typical, maybe, it's not a pattern. But I feel like Stefan's role is to support me so I can be my best self in caring for my brother. So I know that there's siblings whose partners are very involved directly with their person with a disability, but that's not the case in our house. But he supports me so I can do my best to support Paul. But it is really tricky and it's really difficult. And I don't know if everybody would want to become sort of in the back seat while you sort out your things with your brother. And they're both very, like, Paul's got a big personality. He's not a quiet person. So yeah,
He's
it's a
got
really
strong opinions, and he's a very interesting person. I find him to be dynamic, and he knows his mind, and he's a very interesting person to speak with because his life experience is so different from mine, for example. So I'm really curious to know what he thinks about everything.
yes.
I'm wondering if you can say something, Helen, about, there may be people listening today who are like me. We just redid our wills and powers of attorney and everything. And we're at the stage of our lives where we're looking at what life will be like for our son, Nicholas, after my husband and I die. And I mean, we've got the paperwork in place, but we haven't really done anything in the way of preparing our daughter for whatever role she might take. Maybe because partly we don't know what role she will take, because she doesn't even live in Canada at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
But there she is in the will and in the power of attorney. So she will be the medical decision maker and everything. What advice do you have, if any, and what are the conversations that you're having at Siblings Canada about, I wish my parents had done this. I wish my parents had said this. I really am looking, and I know others are too, for some guidance in how can we begin to have these conversations about the future when we don't know what we don't know. Like
Right.
Nicholas will never live with our daughter. He lives in a medical group home. But so there may be scenarios of people listening who say, well, what happened in your life, Helen, is not going to happen in my family. But what care role will our able-bodied son or daughter take? We don't know. But how can we then prepare? How can we be responsible at this stage of our lives to help along the sibling caregiver relationship that will evolve in the future?
Mm-hmm. Why isn't that the $1,000,000 question? I think that's what everybody wants to know. What can they do to ensure the continuation of a good life for their loved one with a disability? And first and foremost, I mean, it's really it's her choice, right? If she wants to step in and how she wants to step in. So, telling her what you'd like her to do is probably not going to amount to too much. It's really what she decides that she wants to do in that scenario. And I think we talked about it earlier about transparency and
Mhm.
really, like, what do you do in a day? I think is a really important information. I had no idea what my parents did in a day. And I think the financial stuff is so complicated. I mean, the question that you're asking now, Donna, we've tried to answer through our online course, Savvy Siblings, to talk about money and personal support networks and safeguarding. But even personal support networks are tricky because my parents had friends around them who I guess would amount to a personal support network, but now they're aged themselves.
Yeah.
And so the personal support network is like, we don't really have one for Paul, but they would be my friends, but I need those people. They're not
Mhm.
they're not for Paul. So I think um just going back to having conversations, but the conversation is not, would you do this? It's more like, this is what I do. And this is what the home does. And this is what the money is. And this is what the best use of this money might be in the future. I think it's not trying to assign responsibilities to the sons and daughters, and also like who could be a good support for your son and daughter. My mom's best friend, Jane, is the most lovely human in the world. And she invites me over for tea once every 2 to 3 months. And I so look forward to that time with her because well, first of all, she connects me to my mom, but she also tells me, like, you're doing a good job. And I think sometimes that's all we need to hear. I think too, parents could put all kinds of wild plans in place and actually they don't work because once I mean, one of the things that's unique about siblings is that we deal with aging and our brothers and sisters, and so a lot of things really change physically, cognitively, with mental health, and so those idealized plans that are made, they don't work. um, and so perhaps they're a waste of time, I don't know, or they're just like an exercise in fiction, really. So, but
Yeah.
knowing what the truth is, what's real on the ground, I think that's really helpful.
That is really helpful. It's I'm taking away so much personally today from our conversation. And the other truth that comes out that you've said that you've been very transparent about is that sibling caregiving is different from other types of caregiving in that it is much more a choice. And that I have actually heard parents in the middle of like some conversation or conference or something say, well, you know, when asked, what's your future plan for your child with disability? Well, his brothers and his sister will look after him because that's our plan. And how old is that sister? She's 7. Like,
I think
no.
actually that's actually a kind of a violence. I mean, not to
Yeah.
sound extreme, but I feel like that imposing that on a 7-year-old, or it doesn't matter actually how old they are, uh, it's a kind of violence. So people make their own decisions for their own lives, just like you want for your brother or sister with a, or sorry, just as you want with your child with a disability. You want them to have supported decision making, right? You want them to make their own decisions. So why does that apply to one sibling and not the other?
Another.
And yes, so I think
This is
it's really important.
It is so important. Thank you so much for that lesson and so many others in this conversation, Helen. You know, it's just so, and you know, particularly when the sibling is a daughter. We know that caregiving is very gendered, and we want our daughters to be strong, independent women, just as we want our, you know, adult children with disabilities to have as much independence and a good life as they can get. So it's a puzzle. We will continue to try to figure it out. And I'm so pleased that Siblings Canada is there for sibling caregivers. We're going to be sharing that information about how to contact you, how to contact the organization and access the many programs that you offer. And also knowing that you're going to be also looking at ways of broadening the big tent approach to sibling caregiving and including people like Dr. Brian Goldman in your support and in your discussions and ways and means of helping sibling caregivers of all kinds manage and navigate the experience better. So, Helen, thank you so, so much for a wonderful conversation today.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Donna. I don't want this to end, actually. I feel like we have so much more to talk about,
We
but maybe
do.
another time.
Yes,
Thank you for inviting
absolutely.
me.
Yeah. Oh, we do. We do. Thank you so much. And back to you, Christine.
Thanks, Donna and Helen. And just looking at the comments in the chat, thanks everyone for posting that. And it seems like there a number of people who actually didn't know about Siblings Canada. So this is a wonderful introduction to the organization. And I guess I'm in a situation, I'm thankful that at this point in my life, I don't have to look after my siblings, but a number of the points you made really resonated. You know, the fact that you can't just assume that siblings are going to take on that task, and that's something that needs to be discussed. Yeah, really, really interesting. So thank you, Helen and Donna, for bringing these wonderful sort of thoughts and ideas that people need to approach within their families. And interesting, we're kind of continuing the idea of caregivers. So next month on February 14th, everyone, it's Valentine's Day, and Donna is going to be joined by her husband, Jim. And they're going to be talking about like caregiving as a couple. So for Valentine's Day, couples as caregivers, that's what we've aptly titled it. So we hope everyone can join, and where Donna is going to talk with her husband, Jim, and they're going to talk about how, as parents and couple, you know, how do they split sort of the caregiving role, how it sort of impacts their relationship. So good times, I think, will come out of that talk. We'll put a link in. Jen, are you able to put a link in for the, oh, there it is. Yep. Jen put the link in for the February registration. So that's up and running. Thank you, everyone. You will get a copy of this in an email, and I always send in that email a list of all of the YouTube, or I put in the YouTube channel so you can take a look at all of the other webinars if you missed any of those over the last couple of years. So thank you, Helen and Donna. Stay warm, stay safe. Thank you, everyone who joined, and we'll all see you February 14th on Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Christine, is there a way to show the slide with the QR code? Are we
Yes,
able
so I
to
think
do that?
as we come out, yep, there it is right there. I think Jenna's just put that up for us. So if you want to put that in, Jenna, can you move it forward? We also have, yes, the Siblings Canada slide with the QR code. There we go.
Wonderful.
So everyone there, if you have your smartphones, if you just hover it over the QR code, you'll see something, and you sort of just press it, and then the information on Siblings Canada will come up. And if you're unable to do that, you can copy and paste the what URLs there, and that will also be included in the email, and it was in the chat too. So there we go. Lots of information for everyone. Hopefully we haven't overwhelmed you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Hope to see you on February 14th. Thank you, Helen.